Member from Windsor West.
Thank you, Speaker, and it's my pleasure to rise to speak to Private Member's Bill 94, the Highway Traffic Amendment Act. And as a former school board trustee, I certainly can support the idea of putting cameras on the buses to try and stop those that would run, or as they call a blow-by, past schools and put children's lives at risk. And I'll touch more on that in a bit, but I'd like to talk about an issue, and it's directly related to school buses, and that is the bus drivers, because they play a pivotal role in the safety of the students that are riding the school buses every day. Some of them have students on their buses for hours a day, and so we expect that our bus drivers are given the opportunity to provide the best service that they can in order to keep students safe. Unfortunately, that is not currently the case. With the education system funded the way that it is and boards being so strapped for cash and having to balance budgets, often what they do is they form consortiums. So you'll find that the public board, both English and French, will share buses with the Catholic board, both English and French, and other schools, when they have students that are traveling around similar routes, they'll share buses. But what happens is those boards all come together and say, these are the budget constraints that we're in, and this is the money that we have available in order to provide busing for students. And what we're finding is more and more there's a race to the bottom when it comes to those companies that actually provide the school buses and the services. What we also find is that school bus drivers are some of the lowest paid people in this province. So there often is a high turnover because it's a stressful job. Imagine having a bus full of young people, and it is your job to keep them safe, to make sure that they get to school on time, to make sure that they get home, to make sure they get off at the right stop, to make sure that they're not fighting with each other and causing harm to each other. It's a very stressful job. And then on top of that, you're worried about somebody in a vehicle not stopping when you have stopped to let children off, and possibly a child getting hit by a car. And yet, they are some of the lowest paid people in this province. They are also some of the most precariously employed or unstable employment in this province. So when the boards get together, the school boards get together, and they send out an RFP or tender for school bus services, what happens is it often goes to the lowest bidder. These operators are not always the safest operators. They don't always properly inspect their school buses. That's not the driver's fault. But what happens is when they switch from one school bus provider to another, something happens. It's called contract flipping, which means that the school bus drivers that previously had driven that bus no longer are employed to drive buses anymore. They actually have to reapply with the new company for a job. So often what you find is we are losing school bus drivers. And one of the best ways to ensure the safety of the students on the bus is to make sure that we are using skilled and experienced school bus drivers. So I would implore the government side to really take a look at how they're funding the education system and how the tendering process takes place to ensure that there is stability when it comes to the people that are actually driving our school buses. Frankly, in my opinion, they should be getting paid the same wages as somebody that's driving one of our municipal buses. They're charged with the same responsibilities. The only difference is all of their riders are young people. Specifically to having cameras on the buses, we see more and more people are in a rush to get wherever it is they're going. It's not always to work. Sometimes they're in a big rush to get to the Tim Hortons to get their coffee. Sometimes they're in a big rush to go pick up a child from somewhere else, another child from somewhere else. Sometimes they're distracted, which is an entirely different issue. But sometimes they're on the phone. Sometimes they're rummaging for something on the seat beside them. And so I think it's important, and as one of the previous members had mentioned, word gets out pretty fast. When there is enforcement and when there is follow-through, when somebody does a blow-by, when somebody doesn't stop, when a school bus is stopped and letting students off, when somebody who goes past the bus is actually caught and the law is enforced, as that happens more and more, I think we'll find fewer and fewer people are actually running past the buses as the students are getting off. And so my hope is that this will address the issue. I do have questions around who is going to be responsible for putting the cameras on the buses, who's going to be responsible for paying for those cameras, and how the enforcement is going to roll out in the municipalities. But I think that this is a really good first step to ensuring the safety of students on buses.
Thank you. Thank you. Further